Hi everybody, welcome to Vestega. In this video, I'm going to show you how to use our site search functionality to collect data and run an automated appraisal for any site in the country. You can first search for a site by putting in a postcode or address in the Google search box, or you can simply pan to a site of choice. So we are going to go look in the Camden Town area. Now the first thing you can do is use our 400-meter radius search functionality. If you click that and click into a site search location, you can see it draws a 400-meter radius circle around that location, which will show you listed buildings, sites on the brownfield register, as well as the individual plot lines, which you can see highlighted in yellow. Now, when you found the site that you're looking for or simply interested in, you can double click that plot, and that will then highlight that in red to indicate that that is the site that you'd want to look for. You can also use our bespoke site boundary polygon tool if your site would span multiple plots in a land assembly. Now, when you're ready to go, you click the Run button, which will then prompt for a benchmark land value. This is effectively the existing use value of that site plus an element of premium based on its development potential. Now, this may or may not be known at this stage. It doesn't really matter. You can leave it at £0 and you can update that later on in the process. Or if you do know that, you can put it in now. So we're going to put in £4 million for this site and then click Run. Now, what the Vestega Feasibility app is now doing is it's collecting data from over 25 different sources. This will be a mix of free databases as well as proprietary databases that Vestega has built, including its bespoke SIL policy map and its affordable policy map. It will then use that data to automate the assumptions for a residual land value appraisal and then run that appraisal to then first work out what the residual land value is, but then also give you a bunch of other interesting and useful viability data. So you can see now that this is run, it has estimated that the residual land value for this site is £4.2 million with a developer profit of 17.5% of GDV. Now, if you remember, we ran £4 million as the benchmark land value, which means that this site is viable. Now, if we scroll down, just to give you an idea of what this summary tab shows, there's going to be key viability assumptions. So how many units, residential properties, the affordable provision, the flat house mix, peak funding, the equity investment, and the benchmark land value, as well as a viability gauge to show you kind of the rough view of how viable or unviable this site is. There's also an appraisal summary with a breakdown of development value, works cost, financing, profit, and residual land value, which is given as a total amount per square meter, per unit, and per hectare, with a graph just showing that on a more visual basis. There's an appraisal breakdown by tenure and type. So this will show that same appraisal breakdown, but by each individual tenure, as well as flats versus houses, if there were any, with a graphical demonstration below. And then lastly, we have an appraisal cash flow, which can be toggled between monthly and annual. Now, that is the kind of overview summary tab in the viability section. If we then drop into the appraisal tab, we'll show you what that data provides. That will give you a much more detailed appraisal. So that will show you the number of units, the square meterage by tenure, what the pound per square meter rate is, the total sales, working up to a total GDV figure. If there were any grants or non-resi elements, then that would be included in this section as well. We then drop down to the cost section where we show you the residual land value price, land fees, construction, and what the gross net assumption is for that. The build cost rate, which comes from BCIS, which we'll detail in a bit more in another video. Other construction costs, so externals, abnormals, other costs, contingency, professional fees, site contributions, so the market SIL based on Vestega's proprietary SIL database, and then marketing legal costs, financing costs down here, and then lastly profit, which is split between private resi GDV and affordable resi GDV. So this just gives you that appraisal in a bit more detail, and you can also download that into an Excel version if you'd like to do so. The next viability section we have is the sensitivity. So everything we've run so far has been based on the base case assumptions. Now, the three key parameters in any residual land value appraisal are the affordable provision, the sales assumptions, and the cost assumptions. So what this tab does is looks to flex all of those parameters to understand how much land value is going to move up or down based on those parameters moving. So the first table is the affordable provision sensitivity. Now what this is going to do is it's going to run that same residual land value appraisal at different levels of affordable provision in intervals of 5%, ranging from 0 up to 100. So at 0%, you'd have a £5.9 million land value, and at 100%, you'd have a £1 million land value. Now you can see these are in red because we've indicated a £4 million benchmark land value, which means that actually at 39%, as shown in this table over here, that land value will no longer be viable based on the £4 million benchmark land value. So this table gives you a really good understanding of how high the affordable vision can go before the viability tips over, which is useful in planning discussions. Next, we have the cost and income matrix sensitivity, which, as we mentioned before, will run a -10 to +10% matrix sensitivity on gross development value, and then also a -10 to +10% on development works. And it will show what the resulting residual land value is. So again, kind of the worst case is -10% on GDV, +10% on cost gets you to a £2.8 million land value. And a +10% on GDV and -10% on development cost gets you up to a £5.6 million residual land value. And again, with the same color coding showing where you're viable versus unviable. And then lastly, we have what we call a Monte Carlo simulation sensitivity. So what Monte Carlo does is it brings in real life volatilities around certain parameters like interest rates, like sales rates, like build cost inflation, and so forth. And it will run hundreds of simulations and work out what the percentage chance there is of achieving the target profit, which in this case is 17.5% of GDV. This shows a 62% chance, which is quite good. But ideally, we'd like to see that at more than 75% if you're more risk averse, which would then bring you into the green region of this gauge. And then we run a Monte Carlo simulation on breaking even. So this is effectively a £0 profit, so that you don't make a profit, but you don't make a loss either. This shows a 99% chance, which is as high as you can get in this simulation. So obviously a very good chance of that happening. The next section we have in the viability is the delivery tab. Now, so far we've been looking at residual land values, which is kind of predicated on selling that land to a developer or an investor, which is more equivalent to the development agreement return. So that's where you would simply receive the residual land value of £4.2 million. But if you wanted to increase your risk but also increase your return, you could instead run a joint venture scenario where the landowner would invest that land into a vehicle. A JV partner would provide cash, as you can see this middle column right here. And then the remaining funding would be provided by a senior lender. In this instance, the landowner would receive the land value back, as well as 50% of the share in the scheme profit, which means that their return goes from £4.2 million up to £5.4 million, discounted to 5.19. And then the third option is self-delivery. And in this option, this is where the landowner quite simply becomes the developer. They bring on a contractor, they build out the site themselves, receive all of the profit, which totals £6.7 million on top of the land value, or discounts back to £6.2 million. And that is just shown graphically in this table to the right to give you a view of that risk versus return, as well as the timings, because the timings in all these scenarios will be quite different. So this graph shows the actual cash flow of those delivery scenarios. And then the last section we have in the viability is the Compare Sites tab. Now, what this tab does is it allows you to look at the base case site that you've just run, which is in this orange highlight, and compare it column by column against other sites in your saved database. Now, this could be sites in different locations, or it could be the same site with different scenarios run. So this could be quite useful if you're trying to look at different affordable provisions, different social intermediate mixes, different build cost assumptions, different scheme designs. So what you can do is you go down here, this database will show you all the sites that you have saved, and you can click them off and on however you'd like to bring those into, again, a column by column view so that you can understand the different scheme layouts, the different viability metrics, the different residual land values, and the different profits. And then this can also, like the appraisal tab, be printed out in Excel. So that covers off all of the tabs within our viability output section. Check out our other videos, which will help go through the analytics section, the input section, and then the download section. Thank you very much.